As diplomatic efforts gain momentum in Eastern Europe, we're seeing something unexpected. Instead of tensions winding down, one nation is ramping up pressure to levels we haven't seen in months. This isn't random. It's a calculated strategy designed to influence the outcome of peace talks before they even begin. Because in the high-stakes world of international relations, your power at the negotiating table is decided by your power on the battlefield. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what's happening on the ground, explain the cold, hard logic behind this strategy, and reveal what it means for the future of regional stability and global security. This is the story of how nations use pressure to secure a winning hand. Over the past 3 weeks, there's been a surge of activity across the region. Critical infrastructure is being systematically targeted. We're talking about energy facilities, transportation hubs, and industrial centers facing major disruptions. The pattern reveals clear objectives. Hitting energy infrastructure in the dead of winter creates immense humanitarian pressure on civilians who need heat to survive. At the same time, industrial facilities that support defense capabilities are being hit hard, disrupting supply chains and logistics. This directly impacts the ability to sustain military operations. The human cost is staggering. Communities are facing blackouts and freezing temperatures. Essential services are stretched to their limits, running on backup power. International observers are calling it a crisis within a crisis. So, the big question is, why intensify the attacks just when the possibility of negotiations is on the horizon? The answer is all about strategic calculation. This isn't new. History is filled with examples of parties increasing pressure right before peace talks. The logic is simple. You create the strongest possible hand before you sit down at the table, because what you control when the talking starts often determines what you get to keep when it ends. But it's not just about land. There are multiple objectives at play. First, weaken your opponent's military so they're forced to accept less favorable terms. Second, create hardship for the civilian population to increase their desire for a quick settlement. Third, send a signal to the world that you can continue this fight indefinitely, pressuring allies to push for a deal. Fourth, create facts on the ground that any future agreement will have to acknowledge. And fifth, prepare for the possibility that the talks fail, ensuring you're in a strong position to resume operations. This is what analysts call strategic positioning. It's a methodical, calculated risk, and historically, it has often proven effective. So why are we even talking about negotiations now, after such a long and bitter conflict? Several factors are converging. First, there's a growing fatigue on all sides. These extended operations have taken a huge toll, both in human lives and economic resources. The costs are becoming unsustainable for everyone involved, even if no one admits it publicly. Second, there have been political shifts in major world capitals. New elections and policy changes have altered the diplomatic landscape, with a growing sentiment that a negotiated settlement is worth exploring. We're seeing new leaders signal their interest in helping to broker a deal. Third, there's an operational stalemate on the ground. Neither side can achieve a decisive victory through military means alone. The lines have stabilized, creating a deadlock that often precedes talks. And fourth, External mediators are stepping up. Several nations see an opportunity to facilitate an agreement driven by their own interests in regional stability. But the fundamental challenge remains. The two sides have completely incompatible goals. One side demands recognition of its territorial gains, neutrality guarantees, and the lifting of economic sanctions. The other side demands the complete restoration of its borders, security alliances, and measures for accountability. These aren't just different positions. They are diametrically opposed. And that's precisely why we're seeing this surge of pressure before the formal discussions even begin. The current operations are following a clear combined arms pattern. First, less expensive systems are deployed to overwhelm and deplete air defenses. Then, once defenders are engaged or have exhausted their resources, more sophisticated and expensive systems are used to strike high-value targets. These attacks come from multiple directions, creating a complex challenge for any defense system. We're also seeing increasingly advanced weapons that are extremely difficult to counter, reserved for the most critical objectives. The timing is calculated for maximum impact. Major strikes often happen during the coldest nights or during peak hours to cause maximum disruption. They repeatedly hit the same locations, preventing any meaningful repairs. On the ground, there are intensified pushes in key areas to make gradual advances and solidify control over strategic corridors. The goal isn't a single knockout blow. It's death by 1,000 cuts. The strategy is to systematically degrade defenses, disrupt power, interrupt logistics, and deplete resources. The underlying message is clear. Your defenses can't protect you completely. And the only way to stop this is to agree to a settlement on our terms. For the responding party, this creates an incredibly difficult situation. Their defensive systems are performing remarkably well, often with success rates between 60 and 80%. But when you're facing hundreds of incoming threats, even a 20% penetration rate means significant damage. The main challenge is sustainability. They're using up defensive resources faster than they can be resupplied. International support helps, but global production can't keep up with the consumption rate. This forces them into impossible choices. Try to intercept everything and risk running out of munitions, or save them for critical threats and accept some damage. Their energy grid is a critical vulnerability. After months of attacks, it's a patchwork of damaged and hastily repaired parts. Some regions have lost a huge portion of their power generation capacity. Meanwhile, their military forces are holding the line, but are facing their own resource shortages. And then there's the psychological impact. The civilian population has shown incredible resilience, but the constant hardship, displacement, and economic collapse are taking a toll. The leadership knows this pressure is designed to break their people's will. They insist they won't make territorial concessions, but the practical realities are grim. Starting negotiations from a position of weakness with damaged infrastructure, a stressed population, and uncertain international support is a recipe for a bad deal. In response, they've increased their own counter-operations, targeting infrastructure on the other side to show that pressure can go both ways. The outcome of this conflict will have global implications. First, it's about precedent. If taking territory by force and then solidifying it through pressure becomes a successful model, what message does that send to the rest of the world? The international system we've then known for decades is built on the idea that borders shouldn't be changed by force. Second, it raises questions about deterrence and non-proliferation. If certain capabilities make you immune to consequences, why would any nation agree to limit them? The economic implications are also huge. The region is a major supplier of grain and energy, and continued disruption means ongoing problems for global food and energy security. And of course, there's the massive humanitarian crisis, with millions displaced and reconstruction costs in the hundreds of billions. Finally, it all comes down to the future security architecture. One side wants to join a major alliance as its ultimate security guarantee, which the other side sees as an unacceptable threat. Finding a credible alternative is the key to any lasting peace. So, let's look at the most likely scenarios for the coming months. Scenario 1, and the most probable, is a frozen situation. The talks happen but don't lead to a comprehensive deal. Instead, the active fighting de-escalates into a tense, frozen conflict along the current lines. It's not peace, but the large-scale operations stop. Scenario 2 is a negotiated agreement. This would require painful compromises on both sides, likely involving territorial adjustments in exchange for security guarantees and a gradual lifting of sanctions. This would end the fighting, but it could be seen as rewarding aggression. Scenario 3 is the collapse of discussions. The demands are just too far apart, and the fighting continues at varying levels of intensity, prolonging the stalemate and the humanitarian suffering. Scenario 4 is a major escalation. It's less likely, but if talks fail and one side feels cornered, they could decide to take a much bigger risk, potentially triggering a wider conflict with severe global consequences. And finally, Scenario 5 involves internal change. Unbearable economic strain or political upheaval within one of the parties could lead to a new leadership willing to negotiate seriously. So, what should we take away from all this? First, this intensification is a deliberate strategy to maximize leverage. Second, the humanitarian crisis is being used as a tool to pressure for a settlement. Third, any real agreement will involve compromises that will be incredibly difficult for both societies to accept. And fourth, the outcome will set a precedent that will shape global security for years to come. The coming weeks are critical. The choices made now in multiple world capitals will determine whether the path leads toward a settlement, a frozen conflict, or continued devastation. We need to understand the cold, strategic logic at play, but never forget the real human cost. The future of regional stability and the international order hangs in the balance. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into global events.